All right, we're broadcasting and recording.
Jaime, would you like us to, we've got a small slide presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
please go
Okay.
for it.
We don't have any attendees at this point.
Oh, I need someone to enable screen sharing for me.
That's me.
Okay,
You can go ahead.
good, okay. We're just gonna do this in two parts. I'm just gonna begin quickly and then Simon will finish up. But in terms of this, just the committee meeting tonight, we just see this as from now, 7:05 or so, to just 7:30, because the public hearing does start at 7, or it's been advertised at 7:30. So we just want to quickly review project schedule, the draft plan, where we are, comments, draft chapters, but then highlight sort of the next steps and talk about at the end a little bit and save ourselves some time so we can talk about the public hearing.
Yeah, I'll just really quickly, one thing to add is usually we spend a lot of time on the earlier part of the agenda. We think it's important to talk about some next steps tonight, and then also make sure if any of you have any questions about the public hearing itself, we have time there. We don't want to shortchange getting comments from all of you on chapters, but we'll devote the entire meeting next month to that. So. We just want to make sure we have time on the next steps in the steering committee.
So, oh, by the way, at the public hearing, we'll introduce, everyone should introduce themselves, but you're all familiar with this and you know our team. So just on project schedule, by the way, we're very happy to have that meeting with the school district, the school board today. And I think that most of the subcommittees now, we've met with all of the subcommittees now, so that work is pretty well finished. We've invited them all to feel free to comment tonight also about at the public hearing, at the committee's public hearing. So where we are after tonight, we hope that after this we'll get you final parts of the plan for discussion on November 17th, and so that on the 17th spend the evening going over, if you will, the draft plan. Then, based on your comments, we'll try to revise it and then be able to get a draft plan in December is our hope. There's a December trustees meeting to try to get that to the trustees so they have the draft plan. And I think you've seen the zoning code sections that we sent to them. We've also sent them to all of you on the committee. And then tomorrow night, just so you know, is the trustees' action on the scoping document, because we're starting the draft environmental impact statement. All of those will come together, we hope, and we're still on that schedule of public hearings on the plan, the zoning, and the DGEIS, the draft environmental impact statement in February. And after that, making changes as trustees determine. So I think, Simon, we can go ahead here on the next slide. This just gives you, again, really sort of all of the chapters that have been, have been done. And we're finished them now, and we're getting to you the final two, housing and culture and history chapter, which have been written. So you'll have those. And then finally, the key one at the end, we can't do until we discuss it. And that'll be November 17th, sort of an action agenda at the end of the plan. So this public hearing is at a good moment. Most things are online, but it's supposed to be, according to state law, a public hearing during development of the plan. So we wanted to have it before the plan is even, in draft form completely, because that's what the state law intends. And then it's after it goes to the trustees, that's when the complete plan is, there's another public hearing by the trustees, and that's when seeker is in place. So I think we can go to the next one, and here's where we are now. So in blue, those chapters are online. We've got 2 chapters that are coming to you that are done, and then we'll work in the next month on that action agenda and implementation with you. So Simon, I think you can go here to the 2 chapters which are coming to you. housing and neighborhood preservation, cultural and historic resources. Simon, do you want to add anything on these two chapters?
The only thing here is that what we're going to try to do is get these online, basically by November 1. And you'll see as we get into the public hearing portion, we're going to ask the public to send us comments on anything that's online, which will really be all of the chapters by November 13th. And Pat raised this morning, and Pat, we adjusted that. You'll see in the public hearing portion, we pushed that date a little bit later for the public to send comments by November 13th, so that so they're able to see everything. But we're going to ask for all of you to send us comments on anything, on any of the chapters, really, by October 30th. That'll allow us to get these last two chapters online. We'll also talk with you about any comments you have on November 17th. So that's not the 30th is not a final deadline for all of you, but just for us to be able to get these last two chapters online.
And then
A quick question. Did you send those final two chapters today?
Cultural and historic we sent last week.
Okay.
Housing, I have some finishing touches to put onto it. I apologize that I haven't sent it yet, but
Okay.
It'll probably be tomorrow or Thursday. But we'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Okay. Thanks. I just want to make sure I didn't miss it. So.
no, yeah. And then the next slide, I think, Simon, just goes through that community engagement. Now we've had, we think, good, fair responses. As you know, we went through the ideas wall and then the public survey, and we sent you those responses from that public survey, and then the interactive map. So those are now closed out, so that in effect we could now get to this public hearing this evening. And in addition, as you know, to these online engagements, we tried to do those, which I enjoyed, and just it's nice to meet in person, those tours of the waterfront and then downtown. So we tried to have different interactive engagements, and then tonight will be the committees here. I think this one, though, is a slide we wanted to spend a little bit of time on in terms of we want to talk about tonight's public hearing, should be a next slide, but also to mention to you a couple of things, and that is 28th, we've got a meeting with the trustees, which we hope that all of you or many of you might be able to attend. It'll be on the zoning. We've sent to everybody the overlay district, as well as the amendments to the two-family zone, the T district, and also to an idea that I want to credit Jaime for developing a little bit, and we've put some words together on it, and that's the MF3 zone, which is sort of getting at what we call middle housing in a little bit, lower density infill housing. So that's October 28th. And then, as we've mentioned to you, the sort of November 17th steering committee meeting, that's an important meeting, because you have chapters now, but you'll have everything as a draft. You have heard the input from tonight's public hearing, and then we can discuss with you an action agenda, and then we'd be in a position after your comments in December to send a draft. It would be a working draft to the trustees, and then the trustees would then develop that draft. They'll have further comments on it. I'm sure they're going to ask for your continuing comments, and then they'll aim to incorporate the zoning and the draft generic environmental impact statement and the plan as a public hearing in the winter. So that's where I think things are right now.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
For the October 28th and the November 17th meeting, are those both at 7?
October 28th, I'm going to have to defer for a moment. Probably Don't-
7:30, 7:30 on the 8th.
Okay, yeah, October 28th, 7:30. And then all of our meetings with the committee have been at 7. So November 17th would be at 7. But the trustees meeting is at 7:30 on October 28th.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this sequence of next steps? It's Frank mentioned this. It's an important thing to make sure everyone's clear on, just leading up to November 17th, and then what happens after that, where we put together the steering committee draft and then start meeting with the trustees to get their comments.
Well, maybe we can go to the public hearing then. I think that next slide, Simon, is just tonight's hearing. I think that just, again, there's at the top of the slide here is just the quote from the New York State enabling legislation that if the trustees do establish a committee, which they have, during the preparation of the plan, you should hold the committee's public hearing. And this hearing tonight has been advertised both in the newspaper and online. So I think you've met all the requirements to have the hearing. But we wanted to go over it a little bit. Pat and Melissa, you've already talked about this, and so you will do the welcome or opening comments.
Yes, she and I have talked about that.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Great.
Melissa will go first, and then I'll follow.
Okay. And then we've got a short presentation, but it sort of just informs the public. You've seen almost all of it, so it won't be new to you, but I'm just going to go through, again, the public outreach, the schedule, and so on, where we are, what is a comp plan, and then Simon is going to sort of summarize the 10 chapters, or I shouldn't say the 10, well, the last one's not written yet, but what some of the key points are, but very, very briefly at a very high level. So we only take up, we hope in our presentation, just 10 to 15 minutes, because basically by 8 o'clock, certainly, we want to have the public comment period, to just go forth with, and Pat, you're going to, I think, moderate that. It's up to you, but.
No. I'll moderate it. And I mean,
Yeah,
it'll be,
okay,
I think it'll be a joint sort of, Melissa and myself and Jaime, because he's
Great.
going to be able to take people on and off mute and provide them the ability to speak as they go through. So.
Yeah. And
Frank, can I just interrupt for 1 second? Stuart.
yes, absolutely. Sure.
Folks, I just want to remind you, since it's a public hearing, the comments by board, moderator, etc., should probably be kept to as much of a minimum as possible, because the idea of the public hearing is for the public to comment. So while it's good to have some introductory stuff, at the end of the day, if we have people who are in the audience who want to be heard, it's really their opportunity. I know that sounds sort of self-evident, but sometimes that gets lost. And it's important to remember that it's a public hearing, so that's the opportunity for the public to basically have its say on what's being said. That's all I have to say.
No, Stuart, thank you, because it reminds me to say something we didn't put as I don't think we put as a dot point here, but in terms of a public hearing, Stuart said the purpose of it should be, should be sort of self-explanatory, but it is to hear from the public. But it's not to engage in question and answer as much as, in other words, it's not a workshop. It's not a back and forth Q&A. It's really to give the public a chance. Here's what they think. Here's their comment.
Correct.
You're listening. We're listening to what they have to say. Now, having said that, what I usually find, and I hope Stuart would be okay on this, is, sometimes there'll be a question that's a clear-cut question of, oh, yeah, what time is we had just a question before from Rebecca, what time is the trustee meeting? Well, we all know what, so we answered the question. A question like that, substantive, just a simple issue, then I think Pat, or you can have us answer it. But the idea is to hear primarily from the public. And sometimes, at some meetings, some other villages and towns, they'll also, to ensure that everybody gets a chance to speak, they'll ask people, could you be 3 to 5 minutes or so? I don't think you need to do that here. But, if it gets very, very lengthy tonight, I'd leave this up to you, Pat. I somehow don't think, we're used to going at 10 or 10:30, but also if people have a long comment that's already written, they're welcome to read it, but they don't have to. They can submit it also, and that's why the last dot point here, we put that, you might want to say up front even that written comments, they can be taken until October 30th. So in other words, if someone doesn't want to, some people are not comfortable speaking. And so we want to give them a chance to also write in if they have a position on something or they have something that they want.
Two quick things. One is that I neglected to change it here, but in the public hearing segment of this, I changed this to November 13th, just so that's clear. We're going to take comments from the public until
Okay, yeah.
a little bit later. The other thing, just because Frank mentioned it, we talked about it a little bit this morning, and we do have a slide that says that we ask people to keep their comments to 3 minutes, just so everyone knows. If there's a small number of people and it's okay, it seems okay if someone goes for an extra minute or two, that's all right. But if there's a lot of people waiting, or if it seems like we need to cut someone off, we've put that out there. It's on the slide in a couple of places, and so Pat and Melissa, as the moderators, should feel empowered to step in if necessary. But again, if it doesn't seem like we need to be very rigid about it, that's fine. But it's there as a tool for us.
Simon, do we have a timekeeper?
We didn't establish a timekeeper as such, but I think, Karen, if you want to do that, we could, one of us.
Yeah.
I can be the timekeeper.
Great.
And I was going to go get a watch. Go get my watch too. It's really easy.
I have a nice little digital watch.
Nice.
Yeah, and I would give people an extra few seconds. I mean, then.
No, I'm going to cut them off promptly at 3 mid-sentence. I don't care.
Yeah, okay. I leave it to you. Yeah. Good. I think just any other questions on the public hearing? Well, good. We should be in good shape then.
That's it for this part of it.
Yeah, this is it here.
Yeah.
The next slide is really just our intro here for.
So we have a couple of attendees now, and maybe you could mention what's happening.
Yeah, folks who are joining as attendees, just so you know, we started at 7 with our regular committee meeting, steering committee meeting, which are also open to the public. We're now just a couple of minutes before 7:30. So just sit tight, and we'll get started with the public hearing right at 7:30. Since we do have 7 minutes or so for committee members, anything else that's on your minds that you want to talk about very quickly in the last few minutes that we have?
I don't know if anyone does ultimately want to make comments in Spanish, but I would just create, whenever you say like the floor is open for comments or give the directions, if you could do the same in Spanish. And if you don't, then I'm sure Manny or I or anyone else who does speak Spanish would be happy to translate that part of it as well.
So So
Oh,
Melissa and I just say hello and welcome and thank, but you want to translate that as well?
Sure, yeah, and the whole thing doesn't have to be translated, but at the very least, just kind of the welcome and to let people know this is where you can make comments.
Great.
Yeah, Omar, if you don't mind doing that for us, that would be great.
No problemo.
Okay.
Well, with that, we have 5 minutes left. I'm not sure, but we have to hunker down here for like a longer meeting. Do you think it might be appropriate for everybody to take their little, 3-minute break, 5-minute break, and come back here at 7 if they need one?
7:30, right? Yep.
30, yep. Sure.
Sure, great.
Yep, 7:30.
Okay. All right.
Right, it's just about 7:30. Do we want to start or give it a couple of minutes? Or
Let's give folks a moment to return from our little break. For folks who are here as attendees, just give us another moment or two. We'll get started shortly. Hello, Mayor.
Hi there. I'll be right back, but I'm still here. I can hear you.
If committee members who stepped away are back but haven't turned their videos on, if you could turn your video on just to let us know that we've got everyone back here and that we're ready to get started, that'd be great. Thanks, Manny.
By the way, it looks like we're up to 14 attendees.
Good.
Great.
Looks like just about everyone's back except maybe Stuart.
Stuart's there.
I'm here.
Great, okay.
Melissa and Pat.
Yeah, why don't we get going?
all right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight. We're going to be having Village of Austin Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee public hearing. Tonight's forum will be focused primarily on feedback from the community, both here, and we'll be presenting opportunities in the future where feedback can be received. I almost forgot to introduce myself. I'm Melissa Banta, one of two co-chairs for the steering committee. Pat Yost, who you'll meet in a few moments, the other co-chair. So tonight there will be a short presentation by BFJ, which will provide a brief synopsis of some of the work that's been taking place up to date, some opportunities for future engagement with the community and feedback from the community, and also some of our next steps in various different methods of communication. So whether you're here tonight and possibly maybe something you forgot, something you wanted to mention, there'll be opportunities for you to provide that along the way past tonight as well. Or if you're someone who's probably watching this back at a later time, there'll be opportunities for you to give feedback outside of tonight as well. So I'm going to just turn it over to the other co-chair, Pat Yost, so he can introduce himself as well. Pat?
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate it. Really looking forward to hearing what folks have to say. Like Melissa said, we're just two representatives of the steering committee members who you can see on the screen there. It's a group that have been spending a fair amount of time over the last probably 5-6 months working with the trustee representatives and the trustees and the support group, both within the village staff as well as BFJ, to really kind of take a look at and think through what is it that is really going to help set Austining up for, over the course of the next 10 years. It's a really great kind of opportunity there. And we're excited to participate, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. And a lot of the information that you're going to get a brief overview of over the course of the next 20 minutes or so is online. The website is austiningtomorrow.com, and there are draft chapters of the comprehensive plan that are up there and for further review as well. So really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. And then I think, Frank, I think you're going to talk a little bit about the
Yes.
next couple of pages, right?
Yes, thank you, Pat. I'm Frank Fish with BFJ Planning, and I'm going to share this presentation with Simon Cates from our office, who's an associate principal and also our project manager. I do want to say that we've been working very carefully with the village staff and with the village planner, Jaime Martinez. You can see all the names there, the village manager, assistant manager, and project manager, corp counsel. We also have on our team 3 other firms, actually, Urbanomics and Real Estate, and Colored Sessions, who many of you may know is your village engineer, and then Derek and Edson, who are architects. So what we're going to try to do tonight is just give you, as was just said, within 20 minutes, a brief overview of the comprehensive plan, and then turn this back to Pat and Melissa to take public comment. So with that, I think, Simon, we can go ahead. And
Before we advance.
oh yeah, sorry, Omar. Yeah, go ahead.
Bienvenidos, le queremos dar las gracias primeramente para estar con nosotros. Yo soy concejal Omar López, estoy aquí con miembros de Plan Integral. Nosotros nos hemos reunido sobre los últimos 8 o 9 meses planeando este Plan Integral que va a ser el plan sobre los próximos 10 años para nuestro pueblo. Entonces, esta noche es su oportunidad para poder darnos su pensamiento de lo que nosotros ya hemos escrito de la primera ronda del plan. Entonces, si te va para la página de web, awakeningtomorrow.com, ahí lo puede conseguir y puede darle su pensamiento a nosotros esta noche en esta reunión, o si lo está viendo por video, después también. Entonces, la última cosa es que vamos a durar los primeros 20 minutos más o menos de esta reunión, darle una introducción de lo que está pasando, porque tenemos mucha gente aquí, miembros del Plan Integral, tenemos trabajadores del pueblo, tenemos miembros de la organización que estamos trabajando con ellos, BFJ Planning, para que nos están ayudando a escribir el plan. Entonces, ellos nos van a dar una introducción para que sepan lo que está pasando y no se le puede preguntar cualquier pregunta que tenga.
Thank you, Omar. But Omar, one thing that you might want to mention to everybody, I don't mean to delay this in any way, but is that everything we've produced in writing is also done in Spanish.
Todo lo que nosotros hemos producido también se puede conseguir en español.
Great. And Simon, you can go ahead here. We're just going to go over quickly where we are in the project now, sort of the different community engagement outlets that we've used. Very briefly, some of the comprehensive plan goals and objectives, and then next steps in this. And then the fifth and most important, the reason for having this public hearing is to get your public comments. Just so everyone knows, it's a sort of a year-long project. As you can see here, we started just on the verge of the COVID-19 pandemic, really, and have been working since March with the committee. And you just heard from 2 co-chairs, and all those committee meetings are in blue along this top of this schedule. But we've also been meeting with the trustees and briefing the trustees on these various dates in orange that you see. During this process, we've been developing chapters of the plan, going over them with the committee, and then sending them back for the committee's review. So we're at a stage tonight in the plan where state law says the committee should hold a public hearing during preparation of the plan. And then when the committee is finished with their plan, to transmit that plan to the trustees. So we're hoping that that would be at the end of the year in December. They'll submit it to the trustees. The trustees will then have a draft plan. And the trustees also will have some draft zoning work that's been completed in draft form and sent to both the committee and the trustees. And the trustees have already declared themselves what's called lead agency. That is, everything in yellow here on this timeline is just producing documents that allow the trustees to comply with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and namely that's doing an environmental impact statement. So all of those things, the draft plan that the committee sends, zoning and the EIS will come to a public hearing. That's currently we're targeting February for, and then after that, the trustees would have a March meeting, go over all potential revisions, and we would then work on their behalf for a final plan, final zoning code updates, and as you can see, there are final environmental impact statements. So that's the overall schedule. The next slide just shows the community engagement has been a process all along this development of the plan. We've had sort of a up online, something called an ideas wall for people to make comments on. We did a public survey, sort of using an instrument called SurveyMonkey, and then we've also done an interactive map. And those things, as you can see, have recently been now concluded so that we could have this hearing this evening. So that's all through this has been a public outreach process, and the outreach process will continue in the sense that the trustees will be doing a public hearing also to solicit your comments in the winter, in probably February. So in addition to the committee who's holding this hearing tonight, there have been a range of subcommittee meetings on different subjects, most of which relate to one of the chapters of the comprehensive plan. For instance, there's a housing chapter, there's an economic development chapter, and a waterfront chapter. And we concluded a meeting today with the school board, which is very, very helpful for us. And the results of those types of meetings will be reflected in that final draft plan. We've had a number of trustee briefings, which we briefly described on the schedule. And then tonight is the public hearing. You can see by the committee, but there will be another public hearing by the trustees, both on the plan, the zoning, and the EIS. So I think, Simon, you could go to the next slide. And here are the plan chapters. Everything here in blue is up online, and all of these are also in Spanish as well as English. And then the trustees will be, the committee will be reviewing housing chapter and cultural and historic resources chapter, and those will be discussed by the committee at its November 17th meeting. And then a draft hopefully will be sent to the trustees. So I'm going to turn this over to Simon to just highlight those chapters that I just discussed, so you get a sense of what's in them if you haven't had a chance to review them in their entirety. Simon?
Great, thank you, Frank. I'm going to try to go through these relatively briefly and just summarize some key highlights. There's, of course, a lot more detail in each of the chapters if folks have a chance to look at them online. But nobody wants to listen to me talk all night, so I'm just going to cover some of the key points. So we'll start with an introduction and executive summary. We haven't written this one yet, so you won't see this online. I know it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but we often leave this one to the end to make sure that we're able to summarize the process. We can write an executive summary that's based on the key principles that end up in the plan. We summarize all of the public outreach that we do. But this is what we'll start with, and as we start getting toward November, December, we'll work on this this section as well. But this will be the intro. The next piece that we have gotten into, because it helps inform the direction of a lot of our study and our research along the way, is a village and regional overview. This helps provide context for us as a consultant, and also for the steering committee, and sets the stage in the document for anyone who's reading it, to understand what is the history that has brought us to this point in time. What are some regional planning policies and trends that are impacting or affecting Village of Ossining, as well as local planning studies that have led up to this point that we can draw from. We want to make sure that we're not turning our back toward recent work. You know, the village has done a lot of good work preparing for this moment in time, in preparing this comprehensive plan. So we've incorporated a lot of those ideas into what we've done. We look at planning documents from neighboring communities so that we understand what's happening around you. And we also start digging into census data, other data that's available to us to understand socio-demographic characteristics and trends. So this village and regional overview sets the stage for us. And from there, we start getting into the substantive chapters of the plan that conclude with what we're calling objectives and strategies, or recommendations that might come out of the document. So the first one is land use and zoning. And the land use and zoning chapter really concludes with three key recommendations. And Frank touched on just these from a process standpoint a moment ago. We've sent these in detail to the Board of Trustees and the steering committee. He mentioned that we have a briefing session with the trustees on October 28th to go over these. There is a proposal for a form-based overlay for downtown and Croton Avenue. There are revisions to the two-family or the T-zone, which you see on the map over here in yellow. So a lot of these neighborhoods that are directly surrounding the downtown. And then an idea for an MF3, or a multifamily zone for the village that could provide, as Frank said, sort of a missing middle type of housing. It's not too dense, but it's a little bit more dense than the two-family, three-family that you may see in the T district, and provides an opportunity for a type of multifamily housing that's not quite as dense as what you might have in the downtown. Then moving on to the waterfront chapter. The waterfront chapter really starts to highlight a lot of the ideas of creating balance or trade-offs that you really need to think about in a comprehensive plan. Your waterfront, on the one hand, has a lot of great assets. There's the train station, the waterfront parks, right? Assets like the Sing Sing Prison Museum, a largely commercial district down here with some opportunities for businesses to open up, maybe even some development opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of assets to recognize in the waterfront. But there are also some issues that need to be identified and potentially addressed in the comprehensive plan. The key one is the first one listed here on the left. We know that a lot of sites in the waterfront are currently in the floodplain. That's an issue that's, as we all know, projected to become more and more acute over time. So we need to understand that and make sure that anything that we're proposing down in the waterfront area can be adapted for the impacts of climate change over time. So that gets at some of these key issues of balance and trade-off that we need to make throughout the comprehensive plan. Next, moving into the downtown and economic development chapter. Maybe the first thing I want to say here is that while this does have a bit of a focus on your downtown as the key central economic development driver in the village, it's not the only one. We also look at your commercial corridors on Highland Avenue or Route 9 and Croton Avenue. These are also areas where there are opportunities, there are existing businesses and opportunities for economic development, and maybe even some ways that those ideas can be expanded or could show some growth over time. a lot of the things that we talk about involve how can we grow the tax base, expand the local job market, and make sure that there are opportunities for everyone in the village. What are ways that barriers can be reduced in order to make sure that new businesses that want to open up in Ossining aren't turned away because they think there might be an easier pathway in one of the neighboring communities. Then moving into the transportation chapter, we're looking at things like, what are local changes that you can make that you can control? For example, are there circulation changes that we can make, like the recommendation in the diagram over here regarding Secor Road and Main Street? Are there sidewalks and pedestrian ways and bicycle infrastructure that need to be added or improved? But we also like to think about some regional issues, like what needs to happen with Route 9A and Route 9 in order to improve safety, make those roads more, make Route 9 in particular more pedestrian friendly, while balancing, again, thinking about those balances and trade-offs, potential issues on congestion. You don't control those roads, right? So that's something that we need to be mindful of, but we can still put ideas out there where Ossining can take an advocacy stance and try to get the state, in this case, state DOT, to move on some of your priorities. One thing I want to highlight here, which is important for everyone to be aware of, many people probably are, is that the village has engaged a consultant, Nelson Nygaard, to develop a parking and mobility plan, particularly focused on the downtown, and potentially looking at ways to consolidate parking assets. That's a study that's going on. It's going to go into even more detail than we've gone into, particularly on parking and mobility in the downtown. We've had a conversation with that consultant, and so even though we're at a different time frame in our processes, we want to make sure they benefit from the work that we've done, and as they start getting into some of their key takeaways, maybe we can circle back and incorporate those into the comprehensive plan as well. The next chapter is called Sustainable Infrastructure. There's a lot in here. This is maybe one of the heftiest chapters, and there's a lot of highlights here on the left, but they're broken up into three main categories. The first couple are about utilities or traditional infrastructure like water, sewer, and stormwater. There's some in here that relate to municipal facilities like public safety, like your fire stations, and resources like that. But perhaps the most important aspect of this chapter is understanding the school district, potential impacts on the school district, and what might happen in the case of some of the zoning changes that we've talked about. So we start getting into the overlap that happens between these different chapters. Frank mentioned before that just earlier today, we had a meeting with the school board, and we're very happy to have had that conversation and to hear directly what some of the concerns are, and talk about what are their concerns and what are the issues that we need to know as we're thinking about other aspects of this comprehensive plan. So that was a great conversation for us to have. The next chapter is housing and neighborhood preservation. This builds on a lot of ideas about affordable housing that are in your 2009 plan, but it's not just about affordable housing. It's about other issues related to housing, and we're thinking about ways that we can make sure that there are adequate housing resources for everyone who needs them. You want to make sure that you can attract new residents. You want to make sure that existing buildings are up to code and are safe, but you also don't want to displace people who are living in your village and are part of your community. So there's a lot of issues to balance here to make sure that that you have adequate housing resources, and for folks who need affordable housing, as well as people who you want to attract to the village, and continue to grow. One thing that we focus on in the chapter, it's not here on the slide, but a lot of folks are maybe starting to hear about what's what's happening with housing in Westchester County during the COVID-19 pandemic. There are some changes in housing trends that have been going on over the course of the last 4 or 5 months that are different from what we had been seeing in the planning community for the last few years. There is less of an emphasis on dense downtown living and maybe a little bit more of an emphasis on more suburban areas. Austining has both, so this is not necessarily a negative for you, but it's something to start looking at and keeping an eye on and continuing to monitor and understand. Is this a trend that is momentary because we're in the midst of this pandemic, or is it going to be more of a medium-term or long-term change? We don't know the answer to that right now, but we want to get it into the plan so that everyone's thinking about it and it's something that you can continue to keep an eye on. And the final chapter here is cultural and historic resources. So important for highlighting the village's history, attracting tourism, capitalizing on the assets that you have that are a lot of why people love living in Austining and people like to come visit. Part of this relates to priorities that the village may want to highlight, but requires partnerships with other organizations, maybe nonprofits, maybe cultural institutions, maybe ways to grow the arts community. So sometimes a comprehensive plan will identify ideas that aren't necessarily in the lap of the village board. It might be something that you need to partner with other organizations to take on. Those are some of the ideas that we talk about here in this chapter. So that's those are the key highlights in the chapters of the plan. I'm going to talk about just this one last slide, and then I'm going to turn it back to Melissa and Pat. But we wanted to just focus on what are some upcoming key dates and next steps. I've got just a thumbnail of the timeline that Frank talked about over here on the right. One thing I want to point out is that even though we've done a bit of work, and the steering committee in particular has done a great deal of work to get us to this point, we're really here in the timeline, maybe a little bit more than halfway through the full process. There's a lot more time left, and in particular this public hearing that we've got penciled in February, more opportunity for public input. I want to make sure that's quite clear. Even though we're having steering committee public hearing, this is by no means the end of the process. This is just a touch point to provide an opportunity for everyone to provide comment tonight, as well as written comment. You can see up here, we want to provide folks an opportunity if you're here tonight and you don't want to speak out, or if you want to put something down in writing, or if folks are listening to this after the fact, please by all means send comments on the chapters that are online. Austiningtomorrow.com. You can send them to your planning director, Jaime Martinez. His email address is up here. Frank mentioned just coming up, we've got a meeting with the Board of Trustees on October 28th to talk about zoning ideas. We've got another steering committee meeting next month, November 17th, to talk about what we hear tonight and also the steering committee's comments. And then the plan moves to the Board of Trustees. We'll hopefully meet with the trustees in December or January, get their comments, continue working on the plan, zoning code updates, and the DGEIS. And again, we've sort of targeted on our timeline February 2021 for a trustees public hearing. Of course, the trustees need to be comfortable with the draft of the plan before they set that, but that's where we identified this in our overall timeline. And then we work toward those final revisions and look toward hopefully adoption of the plan and potentially by early next summer. And so with that, we'll take a step back. I'm going to turn it back to Melissa and Pat to lead us into the public comment.
Thank you, Simon and Frank, and really appreciate that. So that, like Simon said, that now's the time for the public comments. the way that we'd like this to work is, we're here to listen and to hear what you all have to say, based on either what you've heard so far, what you've read online, or just kind of what you feel is important. There in Zoom, there's a raise your hand function, and so that way we know who is interested in commenting publicly now. And then, we'll go through and Jaime will be able to, whenever it's time for you to speak, if you've raised your hand, he'll make you a panelist for momentarily, to give you an answer to have a live mic. So, that's what we're looking to do. We do have a fair number of folks on the call tonight. It looks like there are 3 folks who are interested in speaking. Please try and keep your comments to around 3 minutes until everyone's had a chance to speak, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, Simon, can you take off the comment page and then show everybody at this point? Take off the screen share.
Stop screen sharing.
I'm going to stop sharing just so you can see all of our faces up here. Great.
First person is Brent D. Glass, LLC.
Sorry, before we start, I just want to
do that in this. Yep.
Say it in Spanish real quick. Yeah, no worries. Ahora vamos a comenzar la parte de la reunión en que puede dar sus comentarios. Por favor, si quiere dar un comentario o preguntar algo, puede levantar la mano usando la función en Zoom para levantar la mano. Por favor, mantenga su comentario o pregunta para solamente 3 minutos, porque tenemos mucha gente hoy, y si prefiere escribir su comentario y mandárselo al grupo, puede hacerlo, puede mandar su comentario para el planificador del pueblo, Jaime Martínez, y su correo electrónico es jmartinez@villagevasanin.org. Eso va a estar en la página de web también, pero así puede hacerlo esta noche hablando con nosotros o escrito también.
All right, so with that, we're going to get started with the first comment from Brent Glass. Brent, you are on. You have to unmute yourself, and if you're able to, you can show your screen as well.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in
Could
this.
you state your name and address for the record first?
Sure. I'm Brent Glass, the executive director of the Sing Sing Prison Museum. I'm based in Washington. The museum's office is at 127 Main Street in Ossining. I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. Very pleased to participate in this hearing, and just also pleased to see that Sing Sing Prison Museum is included as an asset in the Waterfront development and in the village as a whole. The Sing Sing Prison is a national historic resource, possibly an international historic resource. So our plan is to open the museum in 2025, which will be coming right in the heart of this 10-year planning process that you're describing. And that also happens to be the 200th anniversary of the start of construction of the prison. The prison museum will have an economic impact clearly on the village, both in terms of construction, jobs, and also tourism income. And we also want to encourage what I saw in the plan as improvements to transportation infrastructure and access, not in a traditional way, but hopefully looking at a variety of ways to access the waterfront and the prison museum. And I hope the village thinks of the museum as a partner in economic development, but also as a partner in reshaping and transforming the village's identity. We think that our goal is not only to tell the story of Sing Sing Prison, but also to challenge all of us to reimagine the criminal justice system and to make a better society. So this is an opportunity for the village to reposition itself as a place of criminal justice reform at the museum and at other places around the village, when for many years the village has been identified as the place of incarceration. I think that the museum, in partnership with the village, can change that identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brent. Appreciate that. Thanks for joining in. I think I've seen you on a couple of other of the village conversations as well. Thank you very much. Jaime?
Yeah, so we have a couple more people with their hand raised, but first I wanted to read, we have a message here from Jeff Smith, who writes, I have concerns that there does not appear to be any space in the draft materials for preservation of natural environmental features, wildlife, and expansion of preserved areas. So the next person with their hand raised is the Ossining documentary and discussion. And you have been promoted to speak. If you could please state your name, turn on sound and
yeah, sorry. It actually should say Susie Ross on it. Clearly I'm hijacking somebody else's Zoom. But anyway, Susie Ross, 56 Sherwood Avenue. I just want to make a couple of comments. First and foremost, I think this has been a tremendous job by so many people, and I'm really very pleased with the document so far. I think you've integrated so many things that I think are really important. I'd echo in agreement with what Jeff mentioned. I think that our natural resources should be inventoried, or at least what we know of should be indicated somewhere on here, because we're quickly taking advantage of them and running out of them. The waterfront chapter that I've looked at has integrated so many really important things, I think, that have been brought up by the community and in meetings. But I want to request that, first I'd like to understand when it comes to the floodplain projections, why the medium projections were selected as opposed to the more dramatic estimates. And in addition, I've noticed too that in some places, I think the graphics are really important for a lot of people to visually see what might be expected with these floodplains. I've noticed in some cases we've shown 2050 projections, but in other cases we've shown out to 2080. Where it comes in importance to me, I think, is page 12. I would really like to see projections out to 2080 for that particular, for that very same one that indicates the DPW site. And if it's not included, I'd like to understand why. So again, really two questions here. Again, a tremendous congratulations on the job so far. I think it's tremendous. But again, why you selected medium projections and why you only went out to 2050 on the last page of the graphics that show the waterfront and its effect with the floodplain projections.
Got it. Okay.
Well, what, excuse me, clarity only, Pat. What's the process here when people ask questions? Is this just comments for the record, or is this, are there answers? Susie was asking a question, so I was just curious. Is the point of our meeting today for the public to state, make some comments, observations, etc., for you all to then go and digest separate, or will there be answers to questions being asked?
Pat, do you want me to just take first crack at that, or?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and take a first crack at it? But I think to Rika, to your point, you know, this is a public comment, right? So I think we're interested in hearing what folks have to say. We're hearing and interested in the comments and what people feel are, you know, either kind of good things, bad things, kind of getting that feedback perspective, right? And maybe I'm doing it for you, Frank, but And I think we were looking to, where there's simple, looking to avoid a deep, very detailed technical long conversation, right? We're here to listen and then to come back with some comments, I think, a little bit later. But Frank, if you've got another
I think,
thought around
Rika,
some of it.
that's the usual purpose of a public hearing. Unlike a workshop, which is a Q&A or discussion, this is really to make sure we hear all comments from the public this evening. And it's something that Stuart mentioned to us in the committee meeting, make sure we give everybody a chance to speak. It doesn't mean we don't, as we have time later tonight, come back and discuss some of these questions, but the important thing is to be able at a public hearing to hear all comments or statements first, and then, we can come back to this and discuss this in more detail, if there's time later.
Okay. So with that, I have not taken you off yet, Susie. I guess you understand now we're not going to be able to answer this question right here. Did you have any further comments past that?
No, I just eventually would like to understand, those in it, see that the addition of that. I think it would help people visually understand what we're really potentially going to be experiencing. So again, really good job. Those are my main concerns.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jaime, there's another.
So there are a couple of people just trying to move people around.
Okay.
So there is another comment that has come in from Lana Kitcher. That comment is not a question, just a sentiment. I agree with thoughts about keeping greenways and nature preserves for wildlife, walking trails, etc. I know Osney needs parking, but I'm also extremely pro creating pedestrian access so that we can attempt to reduce car travel and improve accessibility via foot traffic. It's good for the town, health, congestion, etc. Thanks for proposed walking trails, sidewalks, bike paths, pedestrian crossings, etc. Just want to emphasize that this is an area of great interest to myself for the village. The crash map is scary, especially since I live at one of the crash points. Rika, you have your hand raised. We have an attendee who had their hand raised first, so if it's okay, I'm going to go to them first. Zoom room, you are on. Zoom room, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Is that me? I guess.
That is you.
Okay. So some of you may know me. My name is Joe Clark, and I've been around here my whole life. A couple of things were interesting to me tonight. One, Simon made a comment early that it's about people we want to attract to the village. You don't have to answer it tonight, but I'm curious about who that might be. And the second thing, I thought you made a really good point, which was that the pandemic is at least momentarily shifting what people might think of as a good place to live. And I translate that into sort of multifamily dwellings with elevators and high density to something more in the urban environment. I have to say that I've long been an advocate, particularly since I saw the data that was presented by this study that says that the two populations that are either stable or growing are people under 18 and people who are considered seniors. I don't think there are a lot of seniors who want to live in multifamily high-rise dwellings in Osney. They didn't come here for that reason, and they probably would like to stay here, but we're not providing that at the moment. The other thing I have to say is that somebody made a point that about density, and I think it has to do with preserving open space. everything that I've seen recently is that even though we have fairly generous zoning requirements in terms of density and number of dwelling units, people want more. In one case, on the north side, they want 3 times the current zoning to do something. That seems to me to be really out of the question. It looks like we have about 5% of our open space is still available to develop. So what if it never gets developed? It doesn't really change the metrics much. I haven't really seen, to be honest with you, I only glazed through the information last night, and thank you, Victoria, for sending it out. But it's clear to me that with 5% open space remaining, and some of it is clearly in land trusts, and we're not going to do much about it anyway, that maybe we call it a day on some of that stuff and focus on where we need to redevelop Ossining, and not to worry about people who are coming in and want triple the density and here today, gone tomorrow, so to speak. I'm also a little bit, although I know, Victoria, you and I have had a conversation about what do we do about the large houses in the T-zones. But I think we have to be very careful about that because they need to meet the requirements. We can't be shoving cars onto the street and piling up, the densities, because last time I looked, and I could be wrong, it's a question for Fernando, our assessor, but I don't think, a 2-family house yields twice the tax revenue. And I'm not that concerned about so much the village's portion of that, but the school district is certainly strapped. And the more population we add to the school district, the more expensive it gets. And I'd be really interested to see what Ray Sanchez had to say about his ideas for what would make him happy, because I've had a long road of experience with those guys, and I know what they don't like, but I really don't know what they do like. I don't want to take up any more time. There was a question on the first chart about numbers 8 and 9 that I really like to see a further explanation. The other thing is I think there ought to be one more public input session before it goes to the village board, so you really do have a view of what the people think. I think I read an interesting preamble, so to speak, and what I read over the last night, but I really didn't see much about how any of this stuff and what we might want to do to improve our tax revenue, because I really don't know what the objectives of the community really are. And I think we need to figure that out before we decide how we're going to zone the place. So I'm done.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. And I do think that, as the committees had discussions around, development and open space, and to a certain comment to the other folks too, right? I think, there is an understanding that there is not a ton of, quote, as you call it, developable land in the, in the village proper. And, there's a lot of discussions around how do you, incent sort of, infill or, improvements in existing stock, right? Without making it too onerous for folks, which is a very different perspective than, taking all of the green space and doing something with it. So I think that folks are, at least on the committee, are very aware of that kind of trade-off and understand that, and they're very, understand that kind of, the issue that you're raising from that perspective. So
Could I add one more thing that's a sort of a pet peeve of mine?
Mm-hmm.
is our gateways. Our gateways to this community are, quite frankly, and for all kinds of reasons, we just don't maintain our gateways. And I think, we shouldn't rely on homeowners because it's a bad idea. They don't know, but when you drive into Austin, you got to feel like you're someplace. The north end of Austin is just a kind of a mess. And it doesn't get any better. And I think, once you get past whatever Arcadian Gardens maintains, it's sort of the same thing. But, it's your front door. We should take care of it. We're talking about the DPW That's also kind of interesting. How'd you like that in your backyard? Or how'd you like what Sing Sing is in your backyard? You know, it's a mess. But anyway, enough for my editorial comment, but I think it's time that we stood up to that stuff.
I just want to quickly name, in the spirit of equity, since we named that we weren't going to be responding to folks, that we just be consistent with either responding all folks at the end or responding to everyone after they speak, but not doing it inconsistently so that don't feel any type of way about them being responded to or not responded to.
Got it.
All right. We have a hand raised by Deputy Mayor Levin.
Hi. Thanks, Jaime. So I just want to bring my 2 cents worth. I'm going to jump off of what Joe says just because it's a starting point. The gateways, for me, a lot of this is how we use words and what we're saying. So we do need to add to the comprehensive plan, which, if I understand it correctly, is not only about zoning and all the acronyms that municipalities use, but it's also directional for land use boards that when they make decisions about who should build, and not who should build, but how things should be done and when they should be done, they are supposed to look at intent. So some of the intent for me needs to be very clear here. So gateways, which Joe, I never actually thought about, but as you were speaking, I said to myself, you know, we don't take care of the entrances. We don't take care of where boats come in. We don't take care of Route 9. People will drive right through this community and not realize they drove through it. To me, it's just a missed opportunity. So, and where the train comes in. So I thank you for that point. I want to echo that. I would also like to add to the assets. We've mentioned the waterfront. I, again, would like to be very proactive with our words. To me, it's the waterfront, it's also the water. So the Hudson River is an asset of this community in and of itself, in addition to the waterfront. First of all, when you measure the waterfront, I was surprised to learn not so much of it is all that usable, to be honest with you. We talk about it a lot, but the Hudson River is part of our community. The part of the Hudson River that we look at every day has to be considered when we look at a comprehensive plan, and how things that are done in it, over it, under it, through it. Not only is it another gateway, it's a possible area for tourism. It's also something that we should be very cognizant of. So we should not simply speak about the waterfront. We should be speaking about the waterfront and the Hudson River, which makes all of the Hudson Valley unique, really, in the world. So these are just comments that I think are very important when we discuss intent, so that 5 years from now, when somebody joins one of the land use boards, they might take 5 minutes to read this comprehensive plan and might say, oh, okay, I get it. The reason you don't dump concrete here is because the intent of the comprehensive plan was to include X, Y, and Z. So I do want to talk about that. I do agree, and I don't recall who said it, I think came to the call. And it's not whether I agree or not. I do want to echo another point made, which is that the comprehensive plan's tone and tenor, and so far, and it may take a different turn of events, so far has been about adding and adding and adding to meet some sort of need. It isn't clear to me that we need to build. Somebody did say, you know, a field is actually a very good use of space. What I learned in this pandemic is people, when you have a community with lots and lots of co-ops, condos, and lots of rentals and small apartments, the field becomes the only place that people can actually get some fresh air and play and have a life. And it's actually become, the outdoors has become more important than the indoors in the past few months. And that was sort of a very big lesson for me personally. And I'd like us to keep that in mind as we do the comprehensive plan. So those were just some of the comments. I actually don't think, Jaime, thank for the deputy mayor, not so much speaking as deputy mayor, simply speaking as somebody who lives in this community for more than a quarter century, loves it here, plans to live here for many, many more years, and is, I believe that the comprehensive plan will absolutely be a part of my life once it's printed up. So I think this is one of the most important documents we're going to be putting together, and kudos to the steering committee who spent so much time and energy on it. So I thank you for the time.
So, Pat,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was going to say, if we don't have any more questions from attendees, then maybe
Yeah.
if the committee has feedback they want to give. Just
We do have some more hands raised.
We have some more
in the
hands.
same forum, you know, just giving feedback as far as where we're at this point.
I think there are a couple more hands raised, Melissa.
Oh, are there? Okay.
Yeah.
I did want to mention to the attendees who may not understand, this meeting is a meeting of the steering committee, but we do have members of the board of trustees here that are not on the steering committee, which is why it kind of makes sense that Trustee Levin is making comments. The mayor is also not part of the steering committee, but is here and as a member of the public. So with that, I'm going to bring in Kate Schlott. Kate Schlott.
Hi. Hi, I'm Kate Schlott. I'm on the Environmental Advisory Council for the Village of Ossining. And I just want to let everybody know that I am listening to your concerns about open space and the environmental aspects that we have within the community. And I will be meeting with Jaime in the next week or so to discuss these issues, to make sure that your concerns are addressed. Just so that you are aware, I had been working on an open space inventory for the village for the last 6-7 months. So these are things that I am already considering and putting into the inventory. So if there are concerns from the community, I am open to hearing what the concerns are and absolutely incorporating them into whatever our open space inventory plans are for the future so that we can use it within the comprehensive plan. So just to make sure that the village is aware of that, and whatever your concerns are, I am here and I am listening as we go forward.
Thanks, Kate. That's great.
And next
who else?
is Eric Garrity.
Hello.
Hey there, Eric. Yep. We see you. We hear you. Good.
So we have a new exciting event coming up on this Saturday. We're receiving our first shipment of grain from Hudson, New York, down the Hudson on a schooner to increase our low carbon footprint. We're now trying to receive as much grain as possible without trucking. We came to realize that Ossining has very little to offer in the way of commercial shipping into our village. We're partnering with Shadomuck Yacht Club right now to receive the shipment, but is there something that can be done moving forward to work on our town dock to be able to house more deep water boats or do something to add to our comprehensive plan to encourage people using our waterways instead of fossil fuel based transportation to receive goods?
Got it. So, all right. So that's more of a comment around something that you'd like to see added, or at least taking a look at within the waterfront and the infrastructure component.
Yeah, it's a new thing. I mean, we just have the opportunity to do this, and it could become a regular thing. And you know, our town dock isn't capable of housing deep water vessels. So you know, we have the New York Waterways dock, and we can, you know, work with them moving forward if necessary. But I think that if we could use our waterway to increase our transportation needs for especially the burgeoning craft movement, that would be advantageous. And I know this is kind of, you know, a new concept, but is there any possibility of including that in a future comprehensive plan?
Got it. No, that's really helpful. And this hearing is exactly to listen to new concepts like that. So appreciate that. So take feedback. It's helpful.
All right, so we don't have
Anyone
any
else?
more hands raised at
Lenny?
this time, although we do have a lot of people in the audience. So I don't know, Melissa, you mentioned you maybe want to hand it over to.
Yeah, if the broader steering committee has feedback, because we are having this meeting in lieu of our actual meeting, so it won't be an actual meeting, but it is an opportunity for us to give input at this stage of the process as well. If anyone would like to speak or give feedback on parts of the plan that they've been able to review to date.
We have another attendee with a hand raised. So.
All right. Okay. Kira, is that Kira?
Yes, it is.
Sorry, Kira. Yep. If you could, you're unmuted, and if you want to put your camera on, if you're comfortable doing that, then that's fine.
I'm going to keep my camera off, but my name
No
is
worries.
Sarah Shalin. I'm not going to give my address. My main concern with this plan is how it's addressing the housing crisis in Ossining, specifically affordable housing, and how the housing development by the Waterfront plans to address the lack of not only affordable apartments, but literal houses that people can own and have money to their name and their family to create intergenerational wealth. The building, the apartment building, doesn't really seem to do any of that. It also doesn't seem like people in that direct community have even been consulted with to see if this is something they want in their community. I think especially how large it is, it's going to add a lot of congestion in that area. There's already a lack of parking there. I know the waterfront is there, but I don't know how many problems that's going to fix. I don't know who it's going to serve. I also have a big concern over how that's going to impact the area down there. When Westerly was built, that kind of, I don't know if that necessarily started the gentrification of Ossining, but it certainly contributed to it. And I think this apartment building is going to enhance it even more, especially it being next to a train station, especially Westerly already being there, especially the waterfront being developed as it's been being developed. So I'm just wondering how you're all planning to center Ossining community members who already live here and not community members who are coming here, so that they can go to the city and get all their money and then come back here and afford the places to live where people who already live in Ossining, who are born and raised in Ossining, whose families are born and raised in Ossining, can't afford their apartments, especially in the middle of a pandemic, especially when people are having trouble with their basic finances. So it's a little disconcerting. It's really disconcerting. It doesn't sound like people in Ossining are being centered, especially lower income folks, and especially Black and Latinx folks, especially undocumented folks, the people in our community that are most impacted by the infrastructure set up in Ossining. So I'm wondering how you are all planning to address that in the development of the apartments, and what that's going to mean for the town of Ossining outside of it being a place for tourists and economic development. Who is that economic development benefiting? Because I don't think it's benefiting the people that already live there. It's a large Black and Latinx community. So I'm just wondering, like, have people in that direct area been consulted? Are you planning to talk with them and center their experiences as community members there? Or is this just going to be something that's built with no conversation, no involvement of the community in that area of Ossining? That's all I have to say.
Got it. Appreciate that. Appreciate that feedback, and we'll make sure that try and call that out a little bit, we'll take that and try and call that out a little more. Then I think there's some other discussions that you've requested in there that we can try and make sure get followed up on.
No more hands raised, so I guess can hand it back to the steering committee.
Anyone else from the steering committee have thoughts or comments?
I think this would also be a good time if you were a designated reader for a chapter and there were specific questions that came out of that reading that you think would be helpful to present to the group at this time. This would also be beneficial.
Pat, I just wanted to suggest after this, after the committee speaks, you may then want to go back to some of these questions. Like I think the third speaker, Susie Rose, asked. We could get into some questions once all the comments are done.
I just want to name her last name is Ross, not Rose.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
Anyone have questions on any of the detailed chapters right now? Okay. All right. So yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, Frank, did you have something that you wanted to say relative to the?
Yeah, just so that the third speaker is it Susie Ross? Have I pronounced that correctly, Omar? The mayor also raised this with us in the past, and the question was, can we incorporate the 2080 Columbia University projections of sea level rise in the report? And we said we would do that. So we agree. We'll put those in the report and show them within the comprehensive plan.
So are we just simply doubling back on some of the comments / slight questions that were posed at this stage, since no one else seems to have any feedback, or how do we want to proceed with that?
Yeah, if there were questions you wanted us to address, that was one in particular that I just had noted down and thought it was something we could address quickly this evening.
Right. Well, I think the question posed about the logistics of how the intention behind the outreach in the community and make sure all voices are heard is a good point to reflect on. I know early on in the meetings, there were discussions about how we were going to be engaged in the community, and specifically, BFJ as a whole, that outline of how the intentions are to make sure everyone is reached and everyone's voice is heard and different stakeholders in the community are heard. So I don't know if anyone wants to kind of give another synopsis of how that the intention is set behind making sure all voices are heard during this process, and the input that we're getting is representative of everyone that will be affected by the outcome of the plan.
So we do have another hand raised, and I think we can circle back to that very important question, but we should probably let the person from the public speak first. That person is Maria Klein. Maria, you are, if you could unmute yourself and provide your name and your address.
We good now?
Yes, we can hear you.
You're unmuted.
Okay, good. Yeah, actually, it's John Lohman. I live at 205 Horseshoe Circle, and this is about the comment that the young woman made earlier about the gentrification of the town, and I can understand that completely because I come from Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, there's an island called Nantucket, and maybe some of you are familiar with that, but there are a number of people who have lived there for generations, and they can't any longer because the real estate has gotten so dramatically expensive, and the taxes have become so ridiculous because of that, that they can't stay there. So I know people who grew up there and then had to leave the island because they couldn't afford it any longer. So what Nantucket did, and this is my suggestion, and I'm unsure whether or not this is something that we would put in the plan, but I'm just throwing it out there. Every real estate transaction that occurs, there's a small percentage surcharge that goes into a fund that helps the people who live on the island. In the middle of the winter, in the fall and the spring, the scallops, if you go into the marina, all the big yachts are gone, and it's scallop fishermen who live there year round. So, I mean, people got to live. So it's something to consider in an effort to, for people who want to live here, who have lived here for years, and don't want to leave because they can't afford it. Just something to consider. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
We have another comment from Joe Clark.
Yeah, I just noticed that, let's see, where did she go? There was a comment about input from the public. And early on, I tried to take the survey, but quite frankly, I found it way too intrusive. You wanted way too much personal information on me to get my opinion about what the future of Ossining ought to be. I just want to leave it at that. So if you're wondering if there are more people like me out there, you didn't hear from me because I had no interest in revealing my entire life about what I thought about the future of Ossining ought to be.
Isn't, can someone correct me? Is there a feature on there like it's not, you can bypass certain information and answer certain questions on that survey, right? You're not, I don't think there's an obligation to answer a lot of those questions on there. Maybe that should be made more clear on the website or something going forward, if that's the case.
I believe so.
Would have been good if somebody told me that at the beginning, but.
We can certainly, and that's a good comment if it wasn't clear. Yes, you did not have to fill out personal information if you didn't want to. We can make that clearer as we go into the, into the next months of this. You don't have to fill out personal information.
Frank, if I may, it's Rika, if people are not raising their hands. I want to go back to what Michelle Banta said, which is
Melissa.
Melissa, I do that every time I see you, right? It's unbelievable. I'm sorry. It's just like stuck in my head. Sorry about that. The process question, we've been having this conversation. We've been having it with you guys, with the village manager, about how to reach people to get input, about communications, about feedback, and about collecting more information from more people and not the same people who show up and somehow hear about these things and others who don't seem to hear about it. I want to get back to that because I just feel we haven't reached enough people for their insights. And I don't have an answer. We go through this almost every time we try to do something. And I do hear you, Frank. Yes, I saw the surveys. I saw the work that went in. I think for one thing, it would be helpful that when we have these kind of meetings and also with the surveys, that the results of the surveys be easily accessible as well. There is something to be said that sometimes it's easier for people to respond to commentary than to create commentary. They might see something and say, hey, wait a second, I can't believe that's the big issue. That's not my big issue. And sometimes editing is easier than creating, and maybe that's a format But I would like to challenge you as a consultants here. I don't know if I want to challenge the steering committee. I'm not sure it's their role, but I know a lot of effort has been made, but I'm looking at the list of people, as many as there are. I'm just not feeling that we're reaching as many people, that people even understand what a comprehensive plan is, what its purpose is, and what it does. It sounds like a lot of municipality lingo. It doesn't feel to me oftentimes that people get that this may drive solutions for the future and questions to be answered about how do we want to move and how does one define a community? Is a community a person that was born here and wants to be buried here? Or is a community somebody that moves here for a few years, does whatever it is they do, invest in a business or does something else and then moves on? I mean, are they a part, like those kind of questions is also part of comprehensive plan, and it's so important to engage more people. I'm afraid I don't have great answers, but I do want to go back to that question of how do we widen the reach and deepen the reach, and also put results, even from this meeting, commentary that's made without people's names, doesn't have to have people's names, so that maybe others can respond if they see themselves in that comment or question, say, I agree with that. I get that. That's important. I want to echo that. That maybe that would be somewhat helpful. Just fishing out there for an answer, Frank, but no pun intended with your name. But I agree. I feel like we're not reaching a deep and wide enough group within our community and even in some of the surrounding areas. We don't have borders. They're things that others do also affect us and we affect them. So I just want to bring that to the forefront and bring that back up to the conversation.
If I can chime in with a quick response, two very quick points. One is that when in the beginning of this process, we made it really clear each of the major ways that we have done public outreach, whether it's the survey, whether it's the interactive map, whether it's the opportunities people have had to come out before the pandemic to give their ideas. We wanted to set up metrics that are aligned with what we would expect them to be. So particularly asking BFJ, in other communities you've worked with, how many folks have responded to surveys, per capita, so that we have an ability to compare, so that we have a sense of how we are faring, particularly given this time of the pandemic. And so largely we've been able to maintain with those, like the ideas wall, for example, was and continues to be a space where people have listed a lot of ideas. The second quick point is that there are kind of two modes that we are in when working on something like the comprehensive plan. One is when we are trying to generate ideas. And that's where something like the ideas wall or engaging as many people as possible, whether it's adding a racetrack to the waterfront or renaming all of the streets. It's just like, give all your ideas. This is all about just like, what are all of your ideas? And then there is a point in the process where you get down to, with all of these ideas, how do we prioritize and then create a plan that's going to be actionable over the next decade. And the reality is that, of course, not all of those ideas are going to make the final plan. And so we recognize as municipal officials that are out there in the community that there are so many more voices that could engage in a process like this than do. But I also want to name kind of what phase of the work we are in, whether it's more generative of ideas or where we're trying to actually narrow down. And we're as Simon said, right in the middle, right? We're still taking all ideas, whatever you have, but also we're nearing the point where we're looking to sharpen those ideas into an actionable plan.
Yeah, I'd like to just provide a little bit of commentary, just some feedback on the comment that came in from Kara. For those of you in the audience who don't know me, my name is Jaime Martinez. I'm the planning director, somewhat new planning director here in the village of Ossining. And so I've been fortunate that I've been here for almost the entire process of the comprehensive plan, except for the selection of the consultant. But one of the things that was done here was there was a lot of effort made by I'm assuming, I guess it was the Board of Trustees, it might have been the mayor who did the appointments to the original steering committee to get a broad base of people on the steering committee that represented different communities within the village of Ossining. And from that point, as the process started, it became really important to sort of do everything that could possibly be done to do outreach to the Black and Latinx community, to do outreach to pretty much everyone wherever you could. There was kind of a new policy that was implemented here to really dig into social media and use that as an avenue to try to get the outreach, especially considering the fact that we're dealing with a pandemic and you just, couldn't go to stores and hand out flyers anymore. You had to sort of change your approach and trying to reach out to people. So there was a lot of effort in making sure that that was done. But the steering committee itself is made up of a lot of different community members that don't just represent themselves, but represent communities that are affiliated to them. That's part of how this process works. So while your comments seem to be more specifically directed at a development which is not really, it's not directly related to the comprehensive plan, the comment about trying to do outreach to those other communities is something that is definitely been thoughtfully approached throughout this process, and has from the just production of every single flyer going out simultaneously in English and Spanish, to getting things out there and working through community networks has been a part of that process to make sure that every community was reached. Does that mean that every single person who lives in the village is going to necessarily get a flyer or get a post on the comprehensive plan? Probably not. But every effort was made to reach out because, at the end of the day, the comprehensive plan represents everyone. And so it is important that, that as much feedback is given as possible. So
I'd like to add to that also that in the beginning, in the infancy stages of the committee, back when, pre-COVID, when we were still meeting in person, that was one of the focus points, even before, the firm was decided who was going to be on board, right? It's how are we going to be innovative in the ways that we engage the community. Unfortunately, a lot of that planning was in a pre-COVID scenario, and there was a lot of improvising that had to be done along the way to figure out how to get people engaged and without having that interpersonal element that we were hoping for initially. However, having said that, I think some of the feedback we're getting tonight is integral to how at the halfway point now that we can continue to be innovative in making sure that we're getting feedback from things like people not understanding that they can bypass what they, consider invasive questions, or where they can go to give comments and feedbacks after meetings like tonight. I think, while we definitely are realistic that we're not going to reach every single person, I think it's still integral that we do our best to reach those segments of the community that normally don't get involved with these type of discussions, right? So there's certain focal points that we can still make, like you said, Jaime, the compilation of the committee, it's different people representing different demographics, if you will, from the community. And while that's not a stopping point, because I don't think any one of us would ever start to say we speak on behalf of everyone, our representation here is to make sure that we are helping and giving input into the ways that we can be more innovative to make sure that we are reaching everyone, and not kind of like, I guess, throw our hands up, so to speak. So being that this is a public forum tonight, I would hope that we would collectively take some of the feedback that we're getting tonight and figure out how at this halfway point we can make sure that we're kind of, wrapping this up, knowing that we've gotten as much feedback as we possibly can, because at the end of the day, this is a 10-year document, and we want everyone who currently resides here to also feel like they're part of that design going forward and part of the future of Ossining.
Well said. Mayor, I hear you. I see you raising your hand.
For some
That's
reason,
old
I can't
school
find
right there, you know?
my little hand raising thing tonight. So otherwise I would have politely done the blue hand. So I wanted to say I have missed being part of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. I was in the very early stages in 2019, and then I took myself off, and Omar was a community member. He became one of the trustee representatives, and Manny then joined as a member of the steering committee too. So I've enjoyed many of the touch points that we've had when BFJ has come to our board meetings. And it was nice to hear so many questions tonight, and it's really great to see. At one point we had 21 attendees. We heard from several of them. I will say it's a lot of familiar names. So we have, 30,000 people in the village, and 1,000 of them do an awful lot of things, because they're often, that it's a lot of people who are deeply engaged in, dozens of things, and those are often the people that we hear from at times like this. And I like to think that they go out and have many more conversations with other people and are reflecting back to us some of what they're hearing as well. And I do realize that in 8 days, BFJ will be coming to the village board, so I will save many of my own questions about where we are for that week. But I did want to just circle back to a couple of things that we heard tonight that I think are really relevant to today's conversation. First of all, I think 455 responses to that survey is really good, actually. It was a long survey. It was really in depth. So if even if you didn't have to complete the survey to be counted at that 455, that should be a decent amount of quantitative data that can paint something of a picture of what people are thinking. And I think for those of us who were comfortable sharing our personal demographics, that's important too, and we know that, because if everybody who responds is richer, whiter, and older than the average person in the village, then that's not telling us what everyone in the village is really necessarily thinking. And that's really why we ask some of the questions that we do, is to get a sense of if the voices that we're hearing are an accurate reflection of the whole community, of just certain demographics within the community. I would like to, my question, which I will ask in a moment, but if you could just explain to us more about what the role of urbanomics has been in this. But before you get to that, we're not doing a back and forth with people so much, but I think, and I am only going to state facts because I've recused myself from the DPW, but Kiara's questions were very specifically related to the DPW proposed development. And I hope that she's aware that on Saturday, as was mentioned, at 1 p.m., people can go and walk that site and ask questions specifically about that site. But I also, I'm not sure she realizes that it is a mixed use, mixed income development. So if one of the primary concerns is about displacement and gentrification, it's a different level of concern when you're talking about a mixed income development than if you're talking about another Harbor Square demographic. So it is an important distinction to be made. So I hope that anybody with questions about that development will either show up on Saturday or do a little research to learn about it. And I don't think that I overstepped anything with my recusal by that comment. As far as outreach, when we had originally envisioned outreach, we were thinking we'd be going to fairs and festivals, and members of the committee would be having all of these great personal interactions at the Village Fair and Earth Day. But I will say there is, and also Rika's right when she says that comprehensive plans are these kind of wonky municipal government things that it's hard for the average citizen to really get excited or interested in. But people do react to a concept or a proposal. So, the farmers market is happening every Saturday. Rika and Manny are there because they're running for election. So they're there just talking to voters and saying, get out and vote. But there is an opportunity, if we're at a point where we're still trying to get, even if it's just community awareness, to let people know that this is happening and that these are some of the questions that are being asked, or these are some of the ideas that are being proposed. There is an opportunity to, put up a sign, ask like 2 or 3 really simple questions and then encourage people to go to a website and respond to something, or just, you know, get feedback that's super simple, outdoors, masked up, 8 feet apart from each other. I don't know if that's been considered and you guys have already, you know, washed your hands of that idea, but it does seem if what we're hearing a lot of tonight is that we really need to have more engagement, and we're so limited in what we can do during the pandemic. We know this was not our plan for public outreach, but it does seem like there might be some ways to do some public outreach where we are having people, where there's a, you know, a constant flow of people that are outdoors gathering. So that was my thought on that. And then I'll just finish up with that question. Frank or somebody from BFJ is probably best equipped to respond to this, or maybe Jaime. What exactly is the role that Urbanomics is playing in this? What are they contributing? Because I know one of the things that we talked about early on had to do with sort of the foundation of what Strong Towns, which, oh, I have my book here. Strong Towns book. It's right here. Oh, it's covered with little notes and stuff, but this is my Strong Towns book. And one of the things that we talked about, and Frank Budding, who's one of the steering committee members, is the one who turned me on to that book, and several of us have read it now, but it's based on the premise, at least in large part, that, you know, helping us to understand what is the real comprehensive impact of development in a community. It's not just, are we going to get more tax revenue? It's a lot of it has to do with if there's infrastructure that's been put in place for something to exist. That infrastructure is sometimes seen as an asset, whether that's a roadway or a sidewalk or water lines. But what they ask us to do with this approach is to understand it as it's not a public asset, it's actually a public liability. Because while you may get a developer to build something for the community, which is really essential for them to be able to put their development in, the maintenance of that will be the burden of the public indefinitely. And so those are some of the questions when we talk about what is the real impact of a development. I've never felt, and it comes up a lot when we talk about pilots, because I feel like it's something I'd really like to be more confident in understanding. Are we making a financially wise long-term decision? We have all of the real data to understand if we're making what the decision is that we're making. And is Urbanomics helping us with that type of analysis?
Well, when we initially came into this, it became clear to us that the relationship and impacts on the school district was going to be very important, and that is and has been one of the prime roles of Urbanomics. We had Mayor Tanea, which I referred to earlier. I thought a very good conversation with the school board. You know, what are the projections of the school, of enrollments in the school district? That was a lengthy discussion, and those projections, as you know, are a decline in enrollment, and those projections are by their own Western Suffolk BOCES group that did those, those projections. Urbanomics then extended those projections based on census data and birth rates. And also what Urbanomics did was there was this concern over types of development, particularly multifamily. What was its financial impact? Was it a drag to the school district? Was it a negative, or is it a positive in terms of financials? So that's been, I would say, the major role of Urbanomics. I thought that we had a very good discussion today with the school district, and I think there's a good, more of an understanding of those impacts. I think both ways, in terms of us and in terms of the school district, school board. So that's been the major role of Urbanomics. We've also relied on them and a little bit in the downtown chapter, and in terms of economic development, just knowing a little bit of getting good data on what the market overview is and where the demand side is of things. For instance, retail, which is maybe an easy one to describe, is a weaker market right now. And I think it's easy for people to understand that because of the amount of, expenditures online and with Amazon, those types of groups. So they were looking at overviews of that, but their prime role thus far has been with the school district.
Maybe Melissa's the best person to answer this because Melissa, I know you wear two hats. You're also a member of the school board, and if you were part of the meeting today, can you tell us? I think the school district actually did the recording of that. Is that meeting available on the school district website or on the company? Are any of the subcommittee meeting videos available on the comp plan website? I didn't see them, but that doesn't mean they aren't there.
No, I don't believe all the steering committee meetings are available. The subcommittee meeting, I don't think they are actually.
No, with the exception of the one with the school board, we did put it on our website. So the subcommittee meeting with the school board is available on the OUFSD YouTube channel.
And there's also a written.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Karen, that for the mayor, there is a written record of all of the other subcommittee meetings. We did a summary of each of the subcommittee meetings.
I think we do. We may have videos of some. I know that some were recorded, so they may not be on the website though. One for today, you just have the schools already put it on their YouTube site, and we have a copy as well. So I'll send you the link.
Great. We do have a couple of comments here in the chat, so I want to just read those out. The first one is from Susie Ross. It's kind of a follow-up to her original question that she asked before. Said, thank you for including the 2080 sea level rise projections for the Waterfront chapter. You are showing the graphic mappers in some places for 2050 and 2080, and the one on page 12 showing the DPW site as is only showing 2050. My second question was asking about why the median sea level rise projections were used instead of the high, medium, or the high projections, because those are the worst case scenarios as we know them now based on current science. I know that you are not answering questions here, but just wondering when it will be addressed. Thank you. And so what I do want to respond quickly to that, and maybe if anybody else feels they need to follow up, they can, but I think that it's really important that the rationale be provided in the text of the actual comp plan. And so I think that, that's a great comment, but we really ought to just answer that question in the text itself, like why we use those projections. And so I think that's probably the best place to answer that question rather than to try to fully answer it right now. And if everybody's okay, I'd like to move on to the next one. Is there any other further comment to that, Frank or Simon?
I think we can answer it in the text, yes.
Okay. All right. So the second comment is from Lana Kitcher. They write, I live in a complex on South Highland Avenue. I moved in 3 years ago and was astounded by how little the residents here knew about Ossining or participated in the town. I have seen more participation recently, especially when there was a concert series at the river last year. I would love to brainstorm additional ways to figure out how to get residents more involved that might be unaware of everything y'all are up to. Or you're all up to, I should say, sorry. And that is it for the comments.
Got it. Thanks for reading those, Jaime. But are there any other questions or comments that anyone has that make sense? I don't see any more hands raised or anything. I think we're a little past 9 o'clock. I assume silence means no more comments then.
No more.
Always count to 5 when you ask that question. All right, if that's the case, then I think probably makes sense to finish the public comment. this portion of the meeting, not the public comments, because that goes on until, I believe you said the 17th, right, Simon and Frank?
13th, November 13th.
Yeah.
So if
okay.
anybody wants to write in, we take comments on this till the 13th of November.
Yeah, and you can email jmartinez@villageofossining.org for all of your emailed comments.
Then Omar, do you want to go through that again?
Absolutamente. Si tienen un comentario o una pregunta, pueden mandar un mensaje para el planificador del pueblo, jmartinez@villageofossining.org.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I think that should officially end this call, right? So.
Yes, I think so. Yep.
All right. Once again, on behalf of the steering committee, the committee, I want to thank everyone for participating. All the attendees, all the panelists, and everybody who spoke, and look forward to hearing additional comments from people as you send them on in. Melissa, anything else?
That's about it. Just making sure people know that they have until November 13th to get any more questions, concerns, feedback, input in general. It's all welcome.
Great.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.